this economic picture then mean for silver? What is your outlook for silver for the next 6 months? We'll start with that point.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So Guanajuato Silver just announced this morning that we have become Mexico's latest silver and gold producing company, and we're producing silver and gold at the El Cubo mine in Guanajuato, Mexico. We wouldn't have gotten into this venture had we not been positive and bullish on the prices for the precious metals. Specifically with silver, it's always going to be more volatile than gold. That's just a historical norm. But I think that as governments around the world continue to destroy the intrinsic value of all of the fiat currencies, of all the paper currencies, not just the US dollar, but the euro, the yuan, the yen, British pounds, Canadian dollars, as that happens, there will be more and continued strength in silver and gold.
All right, so you're looking at silver as a play against the debasement of fiat currency, but where are you in terms of looking at silver from an industrial demand perspective?
Well, I think silver is a unique hybrid of those two things, and I think that, and it's one of the things that causes the volatility that silver has. But going forward, the extra uses of silver in the solar panel industry, in the electric vehicle industry, those uses are well documented. There is no large supply, above ground supply of silver. Whereas there is a large supply of above ground gold, there is no above ground supply of silver. So when a supply demand crunch comes on silver, I think it could affect the price very dramatically and in a very short period of time.
So you're launching your mining operations in Mexico, as you just mentioned, expected to sell your first silver gold concentrate before the end of the month. At what price do you need silver to be profitable in this venture?
Well, in our own internal modeling, we've played around with those numbers a lot. We think that we can be profitable with gold as low as $15.50 and with silver as low as about $17. And that would be just, to put a certain caveat on that. That would be cash flow positive over the 36-month period that our internal model is addressing right now. But there's so we've got a lot of internal buffer at our operations, but I think it's the upside that people really want to look at, and I think that at some point, go ahead, Michelle.
Well, so what does your internal modeling say about the upside? You've got your minimum level that silver has to be at for you guys to be profitable. What does your internal modeling indicate as a prospective, realistic upside for silver to end the year on?
Right. Okay. Well, within our internal modeling, I'll just say that we got Bear to do a preliminary economic assessment on the operation. Their IRR numbers at current silver and gold prices would suggest that the operation has something akin to a 300% internal rate of return, with numbers which we just saw a few months ago, let's say of $28 silver. That number extends up to 500% internal rate of return. So it has a lot of impact on the bottom line, the volatility of prices for silver and gold, but especially silver. Higher silver prices for this operation, we will be bleeding black ink all over the place.
Well, that is certainly a good situation to be in, James. As you know, here in the US, we're still waiting to see the fate of that $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Now, given its emphasis on green energy and decarbonization, it's expected to be a boost for silver prices, given silver's industrial use in that sector. Firstly, do you expect this bill to pass? And if it does, how do you see silver price reacting?
Well, I guess let's just comment about the infrastructure bill in particular. So obviously for American viewers, it's front and center in the news. I guess I look at it on a more global kind of basis. There will be some sort of large infrastructure bill in the United States. Under Mr. Trump's administration, the Republicans wanted a huge infrastructure bill. That never really came to pass. So now under a Democratic administration, they want a huge infrastructure bill. How big that bill is supposed to be, I don't really have a comment on that. But it's not just the United States. There are huge infrastructure bills that are being contemplated and in the works right across the globe. Will those infrastructure bills target, the Green New Deal or versions thereof across the planet? Yes. And so will that power demand of silver in the marketplace? Absolutely. Where will that silver come from? It's a well-known, interesting component of the silver market that 70% of silver production comes from byproduct silver. But I think that there hasn't been very much discussion of that lately. If we have a weak economy coupled with a drive towards needing and using more silver, you're going to have base metal mines shutting down that produce silver as byproduct, just as an enormous demand for silver comes to the fore. So I think in that environment, you could easily see silver go into the $40 price range.
$40 silver in what kind of timeline?
Well, I'll tell you what, the politicians can't even tell me when they're going to pass that bill. So, I'm not exactly sure. When one makes predictions like that, I always think it's much more likely to see silver $30 first before it goes to 40. So let's see silver at $30 first. But to answer your question realistically,
like a year down the line, halfway through next year,
$40 silver, I could see that. Absolutely.
And while there has been this big focus on going green, which of course would benefit silver, because silver is used in so many industries, there is this persistent idea that somehow the price of silver is suppressed, that there is collusion to keep prices down, potential artificial suppression of silver or manipulation of silver, as well as other commodities, but we'll focus on silver, and that for starters, there isn't even enough physical silver to cover the paper silver out there. What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm not a huge silver manipulation guru or believer. What happens, because the price of silver is so volatile, when it goes up, it's strange that there's very, very little comment about how it's being manipulated. When it goes down, you get all this comments about it being manipulated. I will say this though. I mean, let me switch it to a just slightly less passionate metal. Let's talk about gold for a second. Is the price of gold manipulated? So there are friends of mine who like to say, well, no, of course not. Why would governments ever manipulate the price of gold? And normally what I tend to say is, well, let's get this straight for a second. Are interest rates manipulated? Yes, they are actually set in this world by federal governments. Well, how about currencies? Yes, there's currency intervention by central banks all the time. It's well known. Some countries get labeled as currency manipulators and some countries don't. That's a very political thing. But all of them are manipulating their currencies for better or worse in the marketplace. Okay, what about equity markets? Are they manipulated? Well, the short answer is yes. They're manipulated here, but to keep the political end of things out of it, let's look at the equity markets in Japan. There are huge tranches of Japan's largest companies that are now owned by the Japanese central bank. Is that manipulation of the equity market? I would say yes, it is. So we've got interest rates, currencies, equities that are manipulated by governmental bodies all around the world. Is it such a stretch to think that gold and then maybe silver are manipulated as well? They are direct competitors to the hegemony of the US dollar and the strength and hegemony of the world's other large currencies. So it's not a big stretch for me to think that there are government entities that play in those markets.
So then, under that premise, if the market is so susceptible to manipulation, why does it make sense to invest in silver?
Well, I guess let's look at it this way. Over the last 20 years or so, gold and silver have been the best performing assets on the planet. And I thoroughly expect that to continue. I think that every investor should have exposure to those markets.
Let's qualify what you mean by the best performing assets on the planet and under which timeline, just for the sake of clarity here.
Well, from I think from 1999 until 2021, gold was the best performing asset in the marketplace.
In terms of return, or in
Yes.
terms of maintaining value?
No, in terms of overall return, gold started the decade at less than $300. We've got $1,750 today. In that time frame, silver was $3.50 an ounce, and a compounded annual rate of return is better owning silver over that period of time than anything else.
Yes, certainly, James, a good idea to have gold and silver in your portfolio. And from 2019 to about 2020, annualized returns have outperformed the S&P 500, given those two huge pullbacks. But I'm not so sure that gold and silver were the top performing asset classes. I do think some REITs did better. But overall, point taken, gold and silver high performing assets. Do want to check on best performing assets.
Fair enough. I suspect that there are cryptocurrency people out there saying, "What about Bitcoin?" So I concede that the statistically that may not be correct. I think that if you add in volatility, I think that they may well be the best performing assets.
But back to your original point, is that because there have been exceptionally well-performing assets, it still makes sense to participate in a market, even if you may suspect that it is susceptible to manipulation.
Well, I think so, because by at least by all of the definitions that I brought into place, if you wanted to avoid a manipulated market, you would have to avoid currencies, broader market indices, metals, any interest rate derivatives. So there wouldn't be too much left to invest in.
You know, James, I guess if you position it that way, you have to play with the system and the rules that are out there. And if you're saying that everything's manipulated anyway, at least focus on this particular market, because it has a track record of, certainly when it comes to gold and silver, of thousands of years.
Well, I think so. I mean, I think if you're going to set foot in the casino, knowing that the casino has some manipulation to it, at least knowing that is the case, I think you go into the casino a little bit more wide-eyed and better able to address those vagaries.
Yeah, doesn't seem like that many alternatives. If you want to play, you have to play at the casino. All right, James, it's been a very colorful and interesting conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on, Michelle.
All right, James Anderson, thank you.